Good morning,
Yeah,
everyone. Welcome to this Copilot for Microsoft 365, How to Adopt It as a Business webinar session. This session is brought to you in partnership with Microsoft by Tiva, technology services and solutions provider, and Ingram, global technology distributor. Today, we're going to go through adoption strategies for Copilot, obviously focusing on the people, and actually towards the end of the session we will go into a live demo around the art of the prompt. So how do you get most out of Copilot in terms of when obviously you give it a prompt in order to get a desired output. We have time for Q&A at the end of the session. I think, Pete, what we'll probably do is when we get to the prompt demo, it might be worthwhile fielding questions then, because there might be some questions that lead on to some prompt activity.
yeah,
If that's
absolutely.
okay. If that's okay. So the session today, guys, will be led by Pete Graham and Alex Parkinson from Ingram. So I think I'll hand over to you chaps now, and it's your show, Peter.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. So welcome back if you've joined us on last week's webinar, discovering how Copilot can help you in your business. As Adam said, we are going to cover off some further detail in how to adopt it. So we're going to talk about champions, we're going to talk about prompting, and then following on from that, we're going to go into a live demo with Alex, who's going to show you some promptings in the different applications that Microsoft 365 for Copilot can do. So if you have any kind of scenarios in your head that you want to use Copilot for, start thinking about them now and drop them into the Q&A for the live demo. So just as a kind of a recap, if you weren't familiar, so Microsoft 365 Copilot, we talked about how to adopt it as a business, and it's built into the applications that we know and love every day. So you can pull a sidebar along for Copilot in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and allows you to be more creative, express what you want to put across, be more productive and more collaborative. Now, when it comes to how Copilot is, the important thing to know is that you have to explain it in your own words, how you're feeling, and to get your point across. Because if you're not giving it enough information, enough of an instruction, it will not sometimes pull across what is the point you're trying to make. So in terms of giving that articulated information, which we'll talk about further on in the presentation, it allows you to unlock additional areas that you may not have ever thought was possible with Copilot. Now, the important thing to take note here is that when it comes to adoption, some businesses, will sometimes adopt products much faster than others. There might be a specific area of Copilot that you might be targeting on in terms of a team or a department or something like that. And there may be some people out there as well in your business that are kind of a bit unsure about AI in the business workplace and things like that. And one of the things that we want to talk about briefly is champions, because when it comes down to the decision makers and the business objectives and building a business case on why your business should invest into some Copilot licenses and the adoption framework of that, we want to look at how you can create a champions program within your organization. So this is one of the things I would encourage you to do this week following this webinar, in terms of reaching out to your teams and different departments to find out who's using AI at the minute. Is anyone using ChatGPT or Gemini or even Copilot, the free version? And what are they excited about most, or what kind of questions do they pose? And we want to find that kind of influence kind of group and create that within your organization. So as you can see here, we want them to look at the people that are really excited about this change, or people that have some common scenarios of business challenges where you can kind of come together and work collaboratively as a team to reduce the strain and the complexity of a project. And this is where it's quite important, where you can use technologies such as Viva to bring that community together. So as we've said, we want to ensure that this champions program that you create, where you'll get expertise knowledge for that team, you'll put them onto training courses and things like that, and they would very, very much be the life and soul of the adoption of that, because it's important to know that, as I've said before, when it comes to adopting a brand new technology, only whenever you're getting feedback from other people that are on that, and using that technology, will you actually get interest and further external people wanting to oh, I want to do what they're doing, or I want to be part of this community or program or something like that. And it can also be quite exciting to be part of a pilot or something like that within an organization. So it's important to ensure that you have the right stakeholders that are going to maintain and push the boundaries of getting that team to do more than what that you think is possible. So we're just going to talk about the 5 steps of developing a champions community. So again, if you're taking notes here, try and think about, the context of what this champions program is going to be about. It's obviously going to be about where can they see Copilot in the organization making a difference, reducing the time and exposure to things that are taking much longer and costing your business time and money. And we want to align the champions across different organizational departments as well, and how they see different teams working more collaboratively to influence each other's decisions and even processes to ensure that you get work done faster. And you want to pick out the people in your organization that really speak up a lot, the people that actually have that kind of influence over others. Or even those people that are maybe even behind in terms of their day-to-day tasks constantly. They've always got a flood of emails, and they really need to understand how they can work better, have a better work-life balance. And then we want to build a plan in terms of the champions and how you can help skill them up first before the rest of the organization, so that when it comes to spreading out the adoption of Copilot across multiple different people, those people that are new to adopting Copilot 6 months down the line can rely on their champions or their colleagues to get the right information and the different practices around how they find the adoption of Copilot and the kind of hints and tips and things like that they can use to adopt it better. And again, the biggest part of the champions program is to share feedback. What is the good stuff about Copilot? What is the terrible stuff that they've had a bad experience for, and things like that? Because obviously, with the adoption of something, learning comes in terms of comes differently to other people depending on their skill and their department of what they're working in. So it's important to have that kind of Viva engaged community and goals in mind, so that when they're collaborating in terms of the feedback on Copilot, they're engaging regularly, maybe on a bi-weekly basis or something. So try and think of the time that those people can put aside for that. And in terms of, as I said before, finding enthusiastic champions who can commit time and effort. So that's one of the things that you need to be thinking about. But also in terms of, you could, create some sort of competition, in terms of who can come up with the most exciting or funniest thing that they can do with Copilot, or who saved the most time with Copilot. And again, you can use the Viva Insights dashboard to track the adoption rates of people, as we discussed in the last webinar, and we'll briefly touch on later. But we want to ensure that every single person in this program is able to communicate effectively, and again, do the training that they can, so that they can become the advocates of it. All right. So in terms of designing a program that shows them as a privileged employee, I've seen some champions programs within other organizations where they give them a little badge or something, or a badge on their email signature, so that they can show to them that they are a Copilot enthusiast or something like that, so that they can support that. And if you want to go really in depth, again, as I said, with the branding and side of things, you can, do the badges and things like that, and send praise through Viva Insights, and even through Teams channels where you can praise people to kind of drive that champion morale as well. And in terms of their day-to-day duties, you could even set up tasks for them to perform on a bi-weekly basis. So when you come to that challenges input and feedback, off the back of it, you could send the team out to do a challenge to think of a great way to overcome the challenge that they had over the last 2 weeks, so that every time you're coming back, you're not only providing valid feedback, but you're also providing a solution to the challenge that they came about as well. And it's important to think of as Tiva, or your Microsoft partner, as an extension of that champions program as well, where they can be involved and support you in the ongoing kind of community feel, and providing insights and even updates from Microsoft. If Microsoft is inputting further details and further updates to the Copilot ecosystem as well, where they can support that further. Now, sharing this on screen now, I'm sure many of you have heard the seen this chart before in terms of the law of diffusion and innovation, but I just want to talk about this because it's quite important if you've never seen this before. Just while we're talking about it, if any of you have ever seen Simon Sinek's TED Talk on the Golden Circle, it's an absolute watch, and it really defines where, how does adoption work and how can you sell into an idea of something. And again, this is completely apparent when it comes to Copilot. So in terms of the innovators, the innovators are typically you guys right now. You guys are the ones on this meeting, on this call right now, and you're thinking and considering Copilot. You're thinking about, how can we put Copilot to work? The champions and the things that we could potentially use Copilot for. And then think of your early adopters as your champions program. Okay. You want at least 10% of your organization, for what Microsoft says, to be licensed with Copilot. Again, one in every department for that first stage or that first hurdle, maybe even two, as you grow your Copilot adoption rate. But once you hit the tipping point of 34%, that's typically when you start to find the overwhelming majority of people start to talk more and more about having that Copilot license within their job, within their ecosystem, and how it's saving them time and energy and performing tasks that they never thought possible. Once you've achieved 50%, that's whenever the Copilot adoption has almost peaked. And then, as you can see here from the chart here, the rest of the business will kind of naturally fall into the adoption of that new technology. So it's important to know that early adopter side of it is very critical in terms of, is Copilot going to be a success? Because when you're licensing Copilot, as we discussed in the last webinar, you don't necessarily have to license it in every single for every single team member, but it's important that you license it in every single department, because each department will use Copilot differently, and each person will use it Copilot for different tasks. Now, when it comes to enabling Copilot and the adoption and measurement, we did talk on the last webinar around the Viva Insights piece and how you can use Viva Insights to monitor the adoption and measurement of the success of Copilot in your organization. So once we've started the adoption program in terms of the champions, and you've set the goals and the milestones in terms of what you want to achieve, in 6 months' time, we want to roll out to more departments within the organization. We want to identify the challenges and knowledge gaps within what are people doing within it. There might even be people in your organization now that are using other forms of generative AI. Include them in the Copilot adoption as well in terms of a comparison between them. But once you've got your champions program up and running, and you've got the licenses for Copilot, and you've got all your security measurements in place, when we start to measure and report back to the business in terms of what value is Copilot providing, you can use Viva Insights for this. Now, Viva Insights, it's important to know, it will include elements of the measurement, but there is additional value adds that you can pay for, which we'll talk about shortly. But again, you can monitor in terms of the sentiment of Copilot, where people are using Copilot the most, and how much time are they saving on Copilot as well. So as a manager, it's quite important to see how much time are they spending. Now, in terms of, this is a kind of a short view in terms of the implementation of Copilot. So if you want to take a screenshot now or get your phones out and take a picture, this is quite important, because this will talk about, once you've developed that champions program, what is the kind of 4 steps in order to start utilizing Copilot to its best ability. So in terms of getting ready from a user perspective, starting to put people in touch with Copilot, and they're labeled as the champions. They've got the community set up, and you're giving them access to Copilot labs in terms of that as well. We can see from a technical readiness standpoint, working with your providers like Tiva to build an optimization assessment, which we'll talk about later, and going through the setups and deployment guides. Once we've done those first 2 points, then we can move on to delivering and impact and extending and optimizing. So in terms of monitoring the measurement of success of Copilot within your organization with Viva Insights, to see how much time are people spending on Copilot, how many times has Copilot drafted a response for employees and things like that, and how much time has it actually saved them. And you can look all that through the Copilot dashboard, but also from an IT admin as well. And then from that, once you've seen the measurement and the success and the adoption and the time to value, then you can start looking at, well, what department has seen the biggest success in terms of measurement of Copilot and adoption, and looking to extend out maybe to an entire department rather than increasing in different departments, but you could extend to an entire department as well. And then finally, you could start to look at building your own Copilot in terms of what we talked about with Copilot Studio, where you can create your own custom Copilots to talk with other external sources outside of Microsoft. Okay, now when we look at this path, when we're including Microsoft Viva, we're talking about Viva Engage as your Copilot Champions platform. This is where the Viva Engage can, again, as you can tell from the title of it, you can engage with your community to create that kind of community feel where everyone can engage with each other, and you can set goals in terms of how each different group, and again, you could maybe even have some of these champions programs on a per department basis as well. But this is where you would start to set up those communities, and they could be led by HR, they could be led by the IT admin, so that you can amplify and support with that adoption. Then you've got the Copilot dashboard again, as I said, within the admin center, which you can highlight, in terms of the difference between the Copilot users and the non-Copilot users to generate some feedback on how other people are using it as well. And people that are not part of the Champions program, if the entire organization is using Viva Engage, they can even post their own questions around, well, I've not got a Copilot license, but what would I do in this scenario, and things like that. Now, we talked about Viva Insights and how you can measure the success of the adoption of Copilot, and where are people spending the most time in Copilot. Maybe most people are using Copilot in Outlook because that's where they find it's clearing their inboxes faster, or it's responding to customer emails and so on and so forth. Or they might be using it in Excel because they're doing a lot of analytical work. And this is where you can measure, where should I take the adoption of Copilot next? Or maybe the adoption rate in PowerPoint is quite low. Maybe I need to provide further training for the team or the champions around, right, your task over the next couple of weeks is to do more tasks within Copilot for PowerPoint. Now, as I said before, Viva Insights is free, but there is a paid for version as well. And this is where you can find the differentiator between should I pay for Viva Insights alongside my Copilot subscription. Now, the prerequisite is you need to have at least 10 licenses of Viva Insights in order to see the premium version of the Insights. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, the included with Microsoft 365, you can see at a tenant level, the number of people eligible to use Copilot, understand how many people in terms of what ways they use Copilot at a tenant level, but also the time savings. It can go through a high level of the time savings that they've had so far, and any metrics and industry research around that. And then you can understand the sentiment around, as an organization, the adoption. But if you have the Viva Insights paid for, as you can see, you'll be able to filter by across department and role and other attributes. So you can see whether a specific department is having a better time or experience with Copilot over other departments. And you can also see the combined time. So you can actually see, so rather than just a number in the air in terms of the high level view across everything, you can actually go into the minutes saved in terms of the patterns of how people are doing it. And then also you can also see usage patterns and collaboration behaviors. So you can be able to see, are you finding that certain team members are collaborating better with Copilot, and where are they collaborating the most on? Is it within a Teams call, or is it within a PowerPoint presentation, or is it within Word? And you can go into the finer detail across, well, actually, this department is benefiting from Copilot more so than this other department. And it's quite important to see that those types of metrics. Now, we've talked about the champions, we've talked about the art of adoption, we've talked about Viva Insights and Viva Engagement, how to build a community feel within your organization. Now we're going to talk about the training and documentation of how can you support the champions further in terms of what can they do, in terms of how can they get set up to become a champion, because rather than just having the badge and being in the community and having a Copilot license doesn't naturally make you a champion. But all the training and documentation in terms of how they can improve upon their skills and knowledge to support others is where it kind of brings everything together. So as you can see here, there is videos of Copilot experiences. There's courses within Microsoft on understanding, how to get ready for Copilot and measure the requirements of Copilot. You can even look from a technical perspective, how to prepare your organization and how to enable users as well. But the delivering impact in terms of the best prompts edit a prompt, get better with results with prompts and things like that. And even the documentation in terms of creating Copilots with Copilot Studio and things like that. Are some of the really key attributes in terms of where you would start to look at, well, these are the tasks and goals in mind that the champions must perform in terms of their usage of Copilot. Now, as we get on here, we're just going to go into the prompting piece. Now, there was a very good question from a customer last week that talked about, I've got a very specific scenario on bids, and I want to use Copilot to pull out certain information from certain files within SharePoint and certain documents. And it's quite an interesting approach, because everybody will be thinking right now of a different scenario that they want to use Copilot. And yes, it can save us time by, following a meeting and creating a presentation from scratch. But we almost want to get through all that and start generating our own thoughts and ideas on what we can do with Copilot. And I shared this approach on the last one, but I just want to kind of go into it in a bit more detail. So as you can see here, it's from the GCSE framework, where it talks around the goal in mind when you're creating a prompt, generate 3 to 5 bullet points, the context and why you need to generate this prompt in the first place. I'm preparing, for a meeting with a client. And then where do I want to look for the information? I want you to look, in emails and Teams chats, or I want you to reference this file and this file and this file. And how do you want it to respond with the information once it's gathered it all in terms of the expectations? So as you can see here, on the left-hand side here, you want Copilot to understand, in terms of how it can summarize the information, engage in the content, and catch up on certain things. Now, the do's and don'ts in terms of how you can prompt effectively with artificial intelligence, and this goes across not only Microsoft Copilot but other generative AI tools out there. When it comes to keeping the conversation going and helping Copilot to understand the thought process and why you're doing certain things, you can ask Copilot to translate a sentence that's in a foreign language, present a technical problem, and then narrow it down step by step in terms of, where did it get the information? Why did it come to that conclusion? And what's there to back it up in terms of, where it got the information? But the things to keep in mind, as you can see there, treat it with respect, treat it professionally as if you were talking to your colleague, not those types of colleagues. I know what you're thinking, but in terms of how you would speak to it, and in terms of, the grammar, punctuation, that type of thing. And remember that, if you're not getting anywhere in terms of the response, or Copilot saying, oh, sorry, I don't understand that, you can always close down Copilot and restart it again. It's almost like hitting the refresh button if you're getting nowhere. Like I for one, came across one where I tried to get it to create a poem on Microsoft 365 licensing and make it around Christmas last year. And over and over and over again, it would start the prompt and go, and then stop and then delete everything, because it couldn't figure out a great way to articulate the rhyming of the context of the information it was sourcing. So sometimes it's best to start again and refresh it. Now, in terms of the do's and don'ts and stuff like that, again, feel free to take a picture here. These are some of the great things that you should be doing and not doing when it comes to Copilot prompting. So in terms of, asking it for feedback, in terms of, how it was helpful with its response and things like that. So if it provides you a response and things like that, you can give it feedback and say, that was amazing, thank you so much. And it can learn that, that you like the tone or the response time or even the context of where it found the information. And then again, providing more details in terms of, as much context as possible. So again, I was saying this to somebody yesterday. When you're giving an employee or a colleague a task to perform, when you're explaining that to them, if they're not familiar with it, use almost the same methodology or the same kind of framework to explain that to Copilot. So in terms of give as much information as possible, the bigger the prompt, the better the output effectively, which you'll see in a second. And in terms of don'ts, don't be vague. Don't just say, can I have this? Get it from here. Because again, it will typically, it will not narrow down at certain areas. Don't use slang or things like that, or informal language, and don't change anything abruptly. So if you've decided, right, I found this information, but I want to see something different, again, it's probably best sometimes in terms of closing the sidebar down and starting a new conversation, or using M365 chat to find further information. Now, I'm going to show you quickly here a really exciting demo that Microsoft provided us for this webinar. This is for a UK insurance company that is using Copilot at the moment. And we have hidden some of the information regarding this, but this is quite important because this here talks around how an insurance company will ask and use Copilot to perform a task using two different pieces of information. Now, one of the important things to note here is that all this data has been anonymized, but you can see here before I press play in this video, and this was completed by an agent where they had an insurance claim template form and they had an output from a customer recording. So as you can see here from this video, you can see the where Copilot has to put in a response. You can see they've labeled it response. You've got the transcript here on screen now where Copilot recorded the call with the client. And I'll just pause it there. You can see here the length of the prompt that operator put in. So claim template, they put in the insurance claim template where it has the response column. The claim call, which is the call transcript of the recording of the Teams call, and giving it the context. This claim needs to be completed and uploaded, a copy of the claim template and format here. Each section should be a separate table with the question from the form in the first column and replace response in the second column with the information from the claim call. So it's telling it exactly where to put it, okay? So I'll just hit play again and you'll see it in action. So once they hit generate, you can see that Copilot is working on it. And again, it's referencing two different files and it's populating the information in real time. As you can see here, it stops here to double check and cross check its information as it populates. But as you can see here, it has replaced response exactly how the agent has requested it and populated all the information from the claim form. And any information it cannot source, it will leave blank typically. So it's important to see that. But I think that is quite a powerful demo in terms of what you can use it for. The next one here is responding to a complaint letter. So again, similar context. A customer has sent in an abrupt email saying, this has been handled terribly. I want compensation for this. And the company's also got a complaint guidance template in terms of how do they respond to your customer. And you can see here that the agent is saying respond to / use this letter of complaint. Use only the guidance rules from this document to resolve the customer's query and offer them £1,000, full £1,000 to cover the damage to their car. So as you can see here, it's again referencing two different documents. And it's going to generate a response to that customer's angry letter in terms of following the company guidelines and rules. So as you can see here, it generates that response. And again, it even leaves in as you can see here, I'll just put in this here, where the customer has, your name, customer service manager, because it knows the level in which that person works at in that organization. So next one here, we've got a claim analysis. So this is going to demonstrate how it can analyze a claim from a legal perspective. So if I just unclick here and click play. So as you can see here, this is from a claimant where they've got a description of what's happened, the legal aspects, supporting evidence that's been attributed to that, and the common scenario from receiving a claim report that requires thorough legal evaluation. It needs to be prepared by an adjuster, and as you can see, the length of the prompt in this is quite large. And as you can see, you can even put in up to 2,000 words into your prompt with Copilot. So analyze the claim report provided and offer insights from a legal perspective, evaluate key details such as claimant information, incident, etc. And again, we're asking it to reference from a claim report as well, and offer insights that contribute to a decision-making process. And again, we'll hit generate and we'll fast forward through. And as you can see here, it will start to populate a response. Now, one thing to bear in mind here when it comes to using Copilot, when it comes to the information, is always cross-check the information. Again, because it is generated by AI, it can still make mistakes. But as you can see here, in terms of if somebody was having to do this on a daily task, it could take them several hours a day, whereas Copilot is effectively getting you 80% of the way done through this process, effectively halving or more than halving the time it is to take to perform these types of tasks. And there you go, 94% finished. And it's still going. So yeah, in terms of how you can use Copilot, I said the prompt is most important. And then the last thing I'm going to show you here before I hand over to Alex is in terms of drafting with Copilot. This is something that most people will probably do on a day-to-day basis. So as you can see from this one here is old version policy 1, new version policy 2. Please compare the old and new versions of the document provided, highlighting and describing the differences between the two versions. Pay attention to changes in text, formatting, and any additional content. Provide a detailed analysis of modifications, specifying additions, deletions, and modifications. If possible, categorize those changes into sections such as context, structure, and style. Your analysis should be thorough and informative, allowing for a comprehensive understanding of the differences between the old and new documents. That's quite a detailed introduction in terms of the prompt. So as you can see here, it's highlighting all the content here, and even has a prepared thing on here, and it even has a table. It's provided a table to make sure that it's easy to understand for the reader in terms of the structure, what's different, what's new, what is the exact difference that happened, if it's not apparent, of course, in terms of the style. And then the conclusion as well, and it highlights that in total. So when it comes to, has somebody made a big difference in a document, or, you maybe sent a contract to your customer and you're wondering if they've changed the contract when they signed it, because you could be unsure, it can kind of go into that detail as well, which is quite interesting. So hopefully that was very insightful. I'm now going to hand over to Alex, who's going to go through a bit of a live demo of Copilot in action. So we'll just check the Q&A here and see if there's anything apparent. So over to you, Alex.
Thanks very much. So let me just share my screen quickly. So I'm just going to start with 2 PowerPoint slides quickly, and then we'll jump into the demos specifically. So hopefully everyone can see that now. So we sort of to start with 2 things. So one is the concept of the top 10 or first tries with Copilot, and this for me is massively valuable. So I come from having had a Copilot license in the very early days of the early adoption program before it went mainstream, so sort of August time last year, where there was no advice, guidance, training, no one doing webinars, no nice videos we could watch, no guidance around what a good prompt looks like. And it was very much baptism of fire. So the value proposition in the education enablement piece and understanding how to articulate a good prompt is massively valuable. It would definitely help shorten the time to realize value within your own businesses. And this is something we can share, but a couple of key elements to call out. So recapping a meetings, this is something I use on a very regular basis, where we can jump very quickly back into a Teams meeting that we've been part of, or maybe we couldn't attend, and use Copilot to generate insights, analytics, meeting notes, for example, across a meeting, and we'll bring that to life shortly. There's a lot of capability from an Outlook perspective, so summarizing lengthy email trails, drafting emails, or even getting Copilot to coach you around what a good tone looks like in an email, for example, even down to how we can use Copilot in Word to start writing content for us. So maybe rather than starting with a blank page, we're able to say to Copilot, this is the context, give me a first draft, somewhere I can start from, where we can then review that and build on it in terms of putting the polished output together. And then just the final slide I want to show you before we jump into some specifics is just my view on where Copilot brings value into my day-to-day business. And I think the guiding summary here is for me now, sort of the best part of a year in, I'm seeing a good 6 to 8 hours of savings per week across a couple of different elements. And I'll step through sort of some of these key points as we sort of go into the live demo piece. But the two sort of standouts for me, definitely, where I start the day in terms of summarizing my priorities, and we'll bring that to life in a moment, but also working in a role that spans across Europe, so many different countries across Europe and into the broader EMEA ecosystem. I'm often having to interface with customers and partners who maybe don't speak English natively. So having the translate capability within Outlook, PowerPoint, Word, whatever it is, again, is massively advantageous. So let me just flick my screen over quickly and we'll start to bring this to life.
Cool. I can see there's a couple of comments and stuff in here already. So feel free to drop in any kind of demos you want to see. So if you want to see Copilot in Teams, in Word, and Excel, or give it a common task that you do, feel free to pop it into the Q&A or the chat, and we can demo that while we have time now. I can just see
Definitely.
one from Malcolm, just really quickly. Alex, I hope you're well. Last week, you mentioned about using Microsoft Cloud Defender for controlling access to consumer Copilot. What licenses do I need? So this is in terms of logging in with your Entra ID, I'm assuming, Malcolm, in terms of how can you police that? Alex, do you know how companies can say that they must be signed in with their Entra ID when using Copilot to ensure that they've got the enterprise data protection? I would assume that's within the Defender for Endpoint or Entra ID management panel that their MSP can provide.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of different ways we can do it. So yes, what you've mentioned is definitely possible. Equally, there are things we can do in, it used to be Cloud App Security, Defender for Cloud Apps now, I think it's now called. There's policies we can write in that capability that allow us to control and sort of customize who can and can't access that content as well. So, one, we can force people to sign in before they can access it, but equally, if there's a set of users we don't want to have access to that capability, then we can leverage that tool set to deliver against that.
Yeah, cool.
And Microsoft have a great article that talks through the end-to-end process, and it breaks it down dependent on the license you have. So it has a capability that talks through the E3 version, the E5 version, Business Premium. So we can share that after the session if need be.
Cool.
So let's jump into some demos and keep the questions coming if there are any more. So what I want to start with is just something sort of quite simple. I'm just going to paste a couple of bits in for ease. So, just to showcase the difference in output based on a simplistic prompt such as this. So can you summarize my Copilot actions for today? I'm asking it to suppress PII data purely because we're running this against my production environment. So there's certain elements that maybe I don't want to showcase to you all today. But obviously in reality, you wouldn't use that specifically. So if we read back what we're getting here, so can you summarize my Copilot actions for today? It's picked out that I'm on this webinar today. These are the time frames, and this is a little bit of narrative around that. What we can then do, so if we step up, and again, I'm just going to paste this in for ease. So let's look at a slightly different prompt. So can you summarize my Copilot related priorities for today based on emails and messages? So given the context in terms of where I want it to search, the time frame, so last 48 hours, and then how do I want to see that data? So for me, I find it much easier to digest in a table. So I'm asking it to present back the data in a table, and I want it to highlight the actions, the owner's initials, details and expectations, and we'll also say suppressing PII content. And let's play that through and see what we get back. It takes a couple of moments. It will scan through my emails, my chats, and it should start to put a table together for me. So for me, I know based on the initials who this relates to. Obviously, the reality behind this, you're more likely to not suppress PII data and have sort of full content available, but just for the purposes of today's demo, I then have a short compressed list of actions from Copilot, having reviewed anything within my inbox and my messages that's related to Copilot. And also, we'll just look at one of these, for example. So we have a link to the particular content. So anything that I ask Copilot to reference, I have a one-click button I can follow through that will take me into the email, the chat message, Word document, whatever that may look like, for example. So one other piece that's really interesting to see, and this is a demo we've been running for a little while now, just while we're still in the sort of chat interface, is using Copilot to analyze, digest, review CVs against a particular job spec. So what we're going to do here is we're going to ask it to review 4 CVs against a CPO job description. They're all sort of demo content, so no worries in terms of showing PI identa in that sense. And what I'm also going to say is I want you to let me know which 2 candidates we should take forward to interview. And for those candidates that we're recommending to interview, can you summarize key strengths and weaknesses per candidate in a table? So we're just going to do a little building here. So we need to reference, do a backslash so we can do a search for the file data, and then we can start pulling in the CVs. So let's do a quick search for Claire's. And what you'll also see here is they don't all have to be Word documents. So we're going to have a mixture, if I remember rightly, of PDFs, Word documents, PowerPoint presentations. Let's just pull all this data together.
Alex, we've got a question here regarding something like that. Can Copilot recognize handwritten information within a PDF and fill out it in an Excel document?
So not Copilot in its own right. There are services within the broader ecosystem that can manage the translation of there's the old OCR type capability where it can recognize written text, translate it into a document, which we can then flow through to Copilot. And there's the potential with the extensibility engine that we can put an end-to-end flow together that manages that process. But in the context of just Microsoft 365 Copilot, or Copilot for Microsoft 365 as it's now known, not at the moment.
I know, just off the back of that, actually, I know that when you're using inked text in things like OneNote, when you're using the pen, if you're using a Surface or something like that, it can move the written notes into text, and then you can copy that and use that against Copilot. But if it is in a contract or something like that, to Alex's point, yeah, there is other tools out there.
Okay, so just while Pete was speaking there, we've let Copilot do its job. So it's analysed the 4 CVs against the Chief Prompt Officer position. It's recommending that Adam and Jane should be taken forward. And I've got a very short summary of key strengths, key weaknesses. I have to say it's not presenting it back in the best fashion. It's got HTML tags for breaks as opposed to putting the breaks in, but it's something we can definitely work with. Now, what we could have done in the original prompt is then say, based on this output, I then want you to put some emails together to, go back to the candidates and invite them to interview. But what I want to showcase in this particular demo is we don't have to have the entire prompt boxed off with the first question that we ask Copilot. So we've set the context. It has the ability to read back up across the conversation trail that we've had. So what we'll do is we'll step forward and build on top of this. So we'll say, thanks, the output's great. Can you now write individual and personalized emails to the successful candidates? I want it to draw on any relevant experience showcased in their CVs. And I also want it to invite them into Milton Keynes, so our head office, for an interview next week. But also, don't forget about the unsuccessful candidates. So can you write a soft email out to those candidates, thanking them for their application and inviting them to review our other career options. So again, let's sort of play this into Copilot. It uses the information that it's already generated and digested, and it will start to build out the emails for us. So we'll just give this a couple of moments. And here you can see it's starting to write the individual emails to each of the candidates. We've got the 2 successful candidates first, and then it will come on to the unsuccessful candidates, because it's something that's quite often forgotten in the interviewing process, in that not everyone is successful, but it's still important to feedback and make sure everyone knows where they stand. So we can just jump into these. If I'd asked it a pinpoint question, so write an email to Adam specifically, I'd then have an option to say, open in Outlook, and the email's constructed, in Outlook, and I can ping it forwards. Just for the purposes of this demo, we've asked it to string all 4 together in one, so I can, step forward with copying and pasting those into an email if I needed to. So just sort of mindful of time. So just want to do one more quick demo, and this is the sort of Teams recap piece. So this is a similar session to this that we ran last week, I believe. I just wanted to showcase how we can use Copilot to come back and interact with meetings after the fact. So we can come into the recap capability in any Teams meeting that's been recorded and transcribed, and we have a Copilot option at the top here. And we also have this capability within a meeting experience as well. I can't showcase today's in-meeting experience because it's hosted by Tiva. I'm an Ingram employee, so there's a firewall, I guess, in terms of who has access to the Copilot specific data. It's ring-fenced to the tenant specifically, so anyone from a Tiva perspective with Copilot will be able to go in and use the in-meeting experience for today's session. I can't because I'm not a Tiva employee, but I can show you how to use that capability. And what we'll do is we'll just look at a simplistic prompt. So we always have, well, it's not Prompt Buddy, but it is a suggested prompts. And one that's really interesting is recapping the meeting. So what we'll do is we'll just ask Copilot to recap the meeting, and what it does is it will review the transcript and it will summarize the intent of the meeting very quickly. So this is definitely one of the areas where I'm seeing some really good time savings at the moment, because it means maybe where there's a meeting that I haven't been able to join, I can come into this, get caught up with it quite quickly, and understand the intent. I can then sort of drive forward, pose questions, or whatever I need to from there. It's equally quite good when you work in a global business with part of your team out in the States, so having the ability to follow and review meetings that I haven't been able to join because of time zones, for example. Again, definitely massively advantageous. And the experience here is very similar. So we have Copilot identifying all the key topics, a summary of what was addressed, who the speaker was, what the content was, but equally we have a link to that section in the transcript. So if I wanted to go and read a little bit more or drill into that specifically, we can jump into that and go into the stack trace of the transcript and read line for line what was said in that circumstance. So Pete, keep me true from a time perspective. We've got time for one more demo, or are we needing to move on?
No, I think we've got time for one more. I think this is quite insightful, because in terms of what some people are, everyone seems to be death by PowerPoint when it comes to presenting Copilot. So I think it's quite important that we continue as much as we can. So yeah, one more demo, I think, and then we can go into Q&A.
No worries. So let's jump into Word then. I'll just refresh the screen. All is good. So imagine the scenario where you've written a PowerPoint presentation. So my scenario here is our foundational services for AI readiness. So we have a great PowerPoint presentation that talks through the specifics of our foundational services for AI readiness, and maybe you've been asked to put that into a partner-facing guide that we can share, in a different format. So with Copilot, prompt engineering capabilities, and the ability to reference files, we can use the engine to kickstart that process from a creativity perspective for us. So what we're going to say here is, can you write a partner-facing overview guide to Ingram's AI readiness program? And we're going to reference one of the files in my ecosystem. So it's a demo version of the foundational services for AI readiness we have. So this is a PowerPoint presentation. And we'll just hit generate here and give Copilot a couple of minutes to bring the initial draft together. And I think the key value here is having an engine to kickstart the process for you. And obviously this works in reverse as well. So if I'd written just words in terms of what this capability looks like, I can equally jump into PowerPoint and say, can you reference this Word document and bring it to life visually from a sort of PowerPoint presentation perspective. So we'll just give this a couple of moments to finalize. And similar to some of the other demos we've seen, so some of the content is put in tables to visualize it differently. Other elements of the content are in sort of bullet points, different headers. So we'll just give this a moment to finish. So yes, if you're comparing this to something like ChatGPT, for example, sometimes the output can take a little bit longer to generate. But what's important, I guess, is evaluating multiple files as part of this process. So it's not just searching an indexed version of the internet to pull back a sort of stock response. It's referencing the files and folders that are important to me and my particular use case. So now we get into the conclusion. So here we can jump back, we can read through. So we've got an introduction, we've got the key benefits and challenges of AI readiness. We look at the components and deliverables of our program, how it's broken down. There's pricing elements, and also the how we enable and support our partner base, and then sort of bringing that to conclusion. Now, what's interesting from a demo perspective is then asking it to change the narrative. So this is written the response based on how it's read and interpreted the PowerPoint presentation. Now, what's always interesting is asking it something like, can you rewrite there we go, it's working now, to target a 7-year-old school audience. And now the reason I've gone with 7-year-old school audience is the narrative, the wording we would use to address that type of audience is incredibly different to how we typically pitch these types of things. And it's more just to see the power of Copilot and how with a simple prompt it can completely turn on its head the type of output it's giving you. So now we're using slightly different languages. So it talks around making beautiful pictures with cool colors and shapes, which in a business context we would never use, but when we're talking to school-age children, it brings it to life in a very different way. And it's not to say that we would necessarily go and sell our AI readiness services into 7-year-old children at school. It's more to showcase the power of the engine and how with a simple prompt we can completely change the narrative of any particular ask that we've given it. So I think with that, we'll conclude the demos for now, unless there's any particulars that have come through while we've been going through these, Pete.
No, I think they're all in shock and awe. It's quite quiet on the front. I guess for those who haven't asked questions, if you could just react with the icon at the top there, whether you liked it, you loved it, celebrate, the whoa icon emoji, whatever you thought to the demo. Perfect. There you go. Standing ovation. Great. Thank you, Alex.
No worries at all.
Brilliant. So I find that very insightful. In terms of the piece that was the biggest surprise for me was the converting it to that 7-year-old story, that last bit. I think that was quite interesting because in terms of the context, you can obviously change the context of the meeting and who the audience is. So you could change it to, if it wasn't a 7-year-old or whatever, it could have been, I want it to change to, a board of directors or something like that, or something like that, or to a sales manager. So it's quite interesting. Brill. Adam, do you want to take this next bit? This is Alex's baby. So Alex, keep him right.
Yeah, sure. So I guess this the demonstrations and information, etc., is all great, but what's next, right? And how do organizations take the step to begin their Copilot adoption? So we've created, between Tiva and Ingram, we've created a number of funded work streams. This particular engagement, the Copilot assessment, is free of charge up until the end of this week, guys. So what we'll do after this session is my team will reach out to you with the information and enable you to access this assessment. All you need to do is register interest before close of play Friday, and we'll give you access to the assessment. But essentially, this is a funded piece of work which is security centric, that basically focuses on what are the things that you need to do to be in a position to adopt Copilot securely from a data protection point of view. So again, this is a funded piece of work, available free of charge if you register interest between now and close of play Friday. Once you register interest, myself and the guys at Ingram will be in touch to basically conduct this piece of work for you. But as you can see, there's some examples here of some of the outputs. We'll basically inform you of what you need to do prior to adopting Copilot to get you ready to adopt Copilot in a secure fashion. So if we could move on to the next slide, please, Pete, because there are a few more things that we can do also. Okay, so the Copilot assessment, as I said, is free of charge until close of play Friday. There are 3 other sort of perpetual free of charge consultancy engagements that we provide that are holistic, but they also have a Copilot component. So the first thing is the digital workspace. So the digital workspace, the zero trust security, and the hybrid cloud are all 30-minute sessions, Q&A based. We'll ask you some questions, you provide us the information, we put it through a metrics calculator, and at the other end it basically spits out recommendations of changes to make and the reasons why. And they're focused on productivity. So the digital workspace, which obviously encompasses Copilot, is focusing on the productivity of end users. How can you make their working environment better in order to get better output from your end users? The zero trust security is essentially looking at your holistic cyber risk position. And again, we'll ask you questions, put it through a calculator, and we give you recommendations for changes and why at the other side. And the hybrid cloud assessment, in terms of applicability to Copilot, is basically looking at where your data is stored and is there a better position from security and cost optimization and performance perspective to basically have those workloads. And obviously Copilot is a component of that, because there are some prerequisites for Copilot to effectively access your data natively. But we'll share the slides after the session, and my team will reach out to you individually with further information in order to gain access to these funded work streams. Move on to the Q&A, guys. I think that's everything.
Yeah. All good. Yeah.
Okay.
I think,
so questions, please.
Yeah, I think there's no new ones at the moment. But I can see that Umar's just dropped in the form for registering Copilot assessment, and then registering for the next event. So next Tuesday, same time, 11 a.m., we're doing an Ask Us Anything webinar, where we will talk kind of like a podcast almost, where we'll kind of talk around the different things that are happening with AI at the moment in the channel, and the things that we've seen, different tools and features that are coming to the Microsoft ecosystem, and even other generative AIs. And just kind of use it as an open discussion and forum to hear from other businesses together collectively to see what they're doing with AI, and maybe the struggles and pain points of trying to get buy-in from management and things like that. But it's an open forum in terms of if you want to join it. There's quite a lot registered for that at the moment, because I'm sure there's a lot of burning questions that we may not have covered in the first 2 webinars. So feel free to get your phones out and snap the QR code on screen now. And we would love to see it next week for the final in this Copilot series. But there's a couple of people from the last webinar that did reach out to Adam separately. So if there is anything that you want to talk separately off this webinar, feel free to get in touch with Adam, and we can book in a session to chat in a bit more detail about your custom environments that you want to look at in terms of what Copilot can assist you with.
We do have a question from James Potter, actually, chaps.
Yeah.
So, what is the most likely cause of adoption failure around Copilot? It's a great question.
Well,
there are two key ones, right? So technical readiness and user enablement. So if you know, prime example from a technical readiness perspective is something as simplistic as sharing with everyone. So loads of people do it. They tick the box in SharePoint that says share with everyone where they're authoring a file, which is great in some circumstances and maybe not in others. So take the scenario where your finance manager has a spreadsheet shared with everyone that details all of the employees and how much they earn on a monthly and annual basis. Today it may be squirreled away in 6 different folders, so a nesting of 6 deep folders, and it's not necessarily something we're going to go and manually look for, even though we could. Now, as soon as you put Copilot in place, we can ask it a simple question, how much does John earn? And because we've got access to that data, it's able to return the response. Now, much as I know, and anyone who's technical will know that the reality is Copilot's just giving you a different way to access the data. It's not actually changing the security landscape, so you could always have accessed that. The perception from the business is Copilot is seen as a bad actor because it's surfacing data that the business doesn't think should be available. So it's not scaremongering. It's just saying, if we can get ahead of all of these pitfalls to mitigate any potential negative perceptions, we're going to be able to drive a far more successful adoption of Copilot, because if we've got that negative perception within the business already, turning that around and then driving successful adoption is going to be really difficult. So that's one way just to highlight how important the security posture and the sort of sharing and governance of a Microsoft 365 environment is when we look at Copilot specifically. But equally, if you look at the user enablement side of things, it's all around training, education, and awareness. And in the early days of talking about Copilot, I always likened having a Copilot license to my son having a car, even though he was only just 17 and he hadn't passed his driving test yet. So the value he saw in his own car in the first 3-4 months while he was learning and being taught by us, and his instructor was very little. It sat on the drive a lot of the time, but he had this shiny new toy, and the value was only realized once he'd passed his test, and he's now out driving anywhere and everywhere, burning all his money on fuel, which is great from that perspective. But if you bring it back to life from a Copilot viewpoint, yes, having a Copilot license is great, but if you hadn't been trained and taught how to construct a good prompt, how to interact with Copilot to drive value, you're going to have this nice shiny new toy that sits in your toolbox of tools that you can use on a daily basis, and you're not going to use it. So if we can get ahead of that, we can support from a training, enablement, and adoption perspective. We can help your users understand, what good looks like from a Copilot perspective. What can we try from a day-to-day perspective, and how do we start building prompts that are constructive to drive true value? That's definitely going to help the adoption side as well. So sort of coming back to the key point, the two key areas in terms of failure are definitely technical readiness and the user enablement and education piece.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I don't see any further questions, so I think we will call it a day there. So yeah, for those still on the session, thank you for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you next week for the Ask Us Anything open Q&A. I think that's going to be very valuable for people. And yeah, once again, thanks for joining us. Thank you, chaps, by the way, Pete and Alex, once again.
No worries at all. Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.